You've searched every census record, looked at all the vital records, and checked every genealogy database that you can think of, but still, your ancestor seems to have vanished. Sound familiar? Well, in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 frequently overlooked types of records that could be just the thing that you need to be looking at to solve your genealogy mystery. Hey there, if we haven't met before, I'm Lisa with Are You My Cousin? And this YouTube channel is designed to help you find your ancestors, grow your family tree, but not be overwhelmed in the process. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, you're in the right place. One of the things that I have found over the years of researching, both for clients and for my own personal research, is that when I'm really stuck on a genealogy question, when I'm really questioning where did that ancestor go or who is that ancestor, sometimes what I'm finding is that I am getting too stuck in my ways. I'm sticking with those more traditional genealogy records that I'm comfortable with. The census records, the vital records, deeds, land records, estate records, probate records. Those are all records that are very traditional in our genealogy research. That's what we're used to working with. But I have to say that probably most every time that I have actually solved a genealogy brick wall in my personal research, I've probably been using what I like to call an out-of-the-box record. In other words, a record that is not really commonly used. It's one that I kind of found by accident sometimes, or I learned about through talking perhaps to an archivist or somebody who specializes in records for that particular time period in that particular county that I research in. The point is that it's the unusual records, the records I don't typically go to as often, are the ones that have actually helped me break through some of those genealogy brick walls. Because at the end of the day, when I think about my ancestors and I'm putting together their lives so that I can learn more about them, I always try to remember that our ancestors are or were complicated people, and they did things for a reason. And so they would have created perhaps records of a different type that I wouldn't have thought of unless I truly, truly understood who they were as a person. So genealogy is certainly about finding the names and the dates, birth, marriage, and death dates. We love to do that, but it's also about learning who they were as individuals, because that's when we can, one, identify them, and 2, make sure that we can share their stories going forward. So I'm going to turn the camera around. I'm going to share some slides with you, and I'm going to walk you through 5 different record types and have a couple of examples so that you can see kind of what I'm getting at when I talk about uncommon or out-of-the-box genealogy records. But I also want you to use this as a bit of an inspiration. What types of out-of-the-box records could your ancestors have created?
Okay, so the first group of records that we're going to talk about are road records. Now, when we think about our ancestors, say in the 1800s, and we think about the roads that they were traveling to and from town, they were dirt roads. And it didn't take probably, I would expect, a lot of rain or snow or ice or just bad weather that made travel on those roads difficult. And so they needed upkeep, they needed maintenance, and that fell to the county. It fell to the county courts to appoint overseers and road crews, because we had to take care of these roads and keep them passable for the local residents. And so the court would quarterly appoint an overseer and appoint a road crew. And when someone was put on a road crew, they were likely on a road crew for an area close to where they lived. They were not being placed on a road crew and sent across the county to work on something 10 or 15 miles away and then have to come back home at night. Because again, guys, this is dirt roads. They were using horses. And so they were going to be on a road crew close to where they lived. So when you find an ancestor on a road crew, what you're finding is a documented neighbor group. We don't know that they necessarily lived side by side. We don't know the order, but we know that they lived within close proximity of each other. And so these were the ones that probably your ancestors were socializing with. They were perhaps doing business with. They were intermingling or intermarrying with. So road crews can give you a really small microcosm of a particular area in the county. Now, this road record here on the left is actually a road petition. And what this is this particular one is actually from 1823 in Wake County. It is an original record that I took a photo of a number of years ago, and I will apologize for my photography skills. They are not the best, but so I realize it's probably a little bit difficult to read, but I'll walk you through it and give you the gist of it. This top section is basically where the gentlemen have laid out the road that they want to build. They want to have a road that runs from point A to point B, They give the landmarks that go through it, as well as the reasons why they need it. In this case, that side of the county was growing quite rapidly. They needed to be able to get to town easily to do their business. Now, it's this lower section that also is quite interesting. So not only do we find that they have the landmarks and where the gentlemen lived in this part of the county, they have the signature of all of the men who were petitioning. So the petitioner's signature. And I got personally very excited because this very first signature up here is my 5th great-grandfather, James Harwood. And as I read through this, I found multiple Harwoods, but guess what? Right over here is George Harwood, who is my 4th great-grandfather. And amongst all of these signatures are other Harwood men, as well as other families that were collaterals that married into the Harwood family that I saw them doing business with in other records. This is my ancestors' community. These are the men that they live, men and families that they live close to and would have been doing business with, perhaps. So it's a really great way to get a look at your ancestors' community. Now, another set of records that I want to make sure that you're including kind of out of the box are school census records. Now, I recently did an entire video on school records and using school records as part of your genealogy research. I will have a link in the description below. I did talk about school census records there, but let me just give you a brief overview here, and you can get more in depth over on that particular video as well. But many people are overlooking these, and they can be quite helpful. This is actually an original record out of 1860 Granville County, North Carolina. And what it would do, this particular one, it listed out the names of the pupils, their ages. So with a little bit of math, we can figure out the birth date for these children and when they attended. Now, one of the things, and I want you to consider why you want to make the effort to find these, is that for the students and the children, one of the things that you notice here is we have the boys and girls. And for the women, sometimes, or the girls, sometimes this could be one of the few references that you're going to find to a child before she marries. So maybe one of the few records she has her maiden name in. Additionally, for children who were born, who lived between census records, so maybe they were born and they died young, but it was all happened between census years, sometimes a school census record could be the only place that you actually find documentation that that child existed, or find the age of the child to be able to estimate a birth year. So it can be quite valuable in this. Now, I've actually highlighted these 5 here because this is a 2-page ledger, and looking at 5 Hunt children. Are they all related? Probably. Can I say that for sure? No. But if I continue across this 2-page ledger, what I find on that next column are the parents and the guardians. And what I find is those first 2 children are the children of Joseph Hunt. The second 3 children are George W. Hunt's children. So I have 2 sibling groups. And then I would make a note on my research plan to say, how are Joseph and George related? And finish teasing out and building out those 2 family groups. So these can provide quite a bit of interesting information. And again, documenting those children and sometimes finding those children that we might not otherwise have to add to the family tree. Now, occupational records are also really good records for you to be incorporating into your genealogy research. These are records where we learn a little bit more about our ancestors. We learn a little bit about what makes them tick and what their interests are. This is an example from the American Red Cross. So obviously this is a nurse, Mabel C. Alexander, and this is a record that the American Red Cross created. She was placed and stationed in Paris. We know where she lived in Paris, but we get some really good, important, vital information that we can use as clues going forward for our research into perhaps Mabel and the Alexander family. So we know when she was born, we have her birth date, we have her place of birth, we know where she studied nursing, we know where the location of that school, when she finished, and where some of her work experience and where she's registered. Down here, we know the name and permanent address of the nearest living relative, her nearest relative. And that is a Mrs. Frank Reisler there in Aurora, Missouri. We don't know exactly the relationship. Could be a mother, could be a sister. We don't know exactly, but we would put that on our research plan to tease that out a little bit more and determine who she is. And then we also have her work experience there in Paris. So we know all about from when she got there on March 20th in 1918 to when she left in January 7th, 1919. And we know a little bit about her personality and habits. We know she had a good health. We know she was efficient. Okay, when it comes to adaptability, well, Mabel, she scored a 4 here, guys. So maybe she wasn't really adaptable. Maybe she didn't fit. Maybe she struggled to fit in. But she was reliable, right? So we have a picture of who Mabel was and perhaps a little bit about her personality and what made her tick. Another type of employment record, again, another example, I should say, would be railroad employment record. So I found this one on Ancestry.com as well as the previous one. This is a record for Carl Smallwood for the Chicago and Northwestern Railway Company. So he worked on the railroad. We know when he was born, so we have a nice birth date here. We know when he started working with the railway. We know what his first job was, where he was first employed, and where he is currently employed as well. And so we see all of that. This looks like his very beginning record that he had, probably his first one. But we have a little bit more information about him. And it would be interesting to follow his career perhaps through the records a little bit more and see what actually happened with him. Now, these are city directories. And this is actually an example from the 1915 Rochester, New York City Directory. And some of you may think, Lisa, we know about city directories. This isn't that uncommon. But sometimes I think the way we use them, we need to go beyond how we're traditionally using them. A city directory is so much more than just putting somebody in time and place. So, for instance, Israel Lisson is the patriarch of the Lisson family. And this record puts him at 81 Chatham Street, Rochester, New York in 1915. Now, I'll be honest, when I first started working with city directories, I would have said, great. I would have taken that and I would have moved on to the next issue or the next year of the city directory or moved on to the next record. But there's a story. There's a story in just this little red box here, right? What we see here is the Lisson family, or part of the Lisson family who is listed in the city directory. We have Israel's son, Abram, who's a bookkeeper. We have Barnett, who is another relative, who had been a contemporary of Israel's. We have David, who was a salesman. Hyman, who was a cutter. We have Mary, his daughter, who was working as a bookkeeper. We have Samuel, who was an operator. What we're seeing are Israel's children that have come of age, are gainfully employed, working outside of the home, and including one of his daughters. We're seeing a family that's doing well, that has raised their children and doing well. We see that he's living on Chatham Street. I would take that and then think, okay, what do I know? What can I learn about that? So I would actually research the streets that the family lives on to see what is that community. In this case, it is a very strong and vibrant Jewish community in Rochester, New York. They've done well for themselves here in New York. So I would take that and start researching those neighborhoods. So again, there's more to just that one entry than an address. We want to make sure we're understanding what it is they're doing and why they're doing the types of work they're doing. And then the last group I wanted to talk about here, guys, are jail records. So these are fun, and this will capture the attention of any non-genealogy interested family member that you might have. Now, jail records obviously give us a lot of information. Those black sheep ancestors that oftentimes generated many more records because, well, they were in trouble, right, with things. And so if you suspect that your ancestor may have been in jail or in prison, then I would encourage you to go after those records if possible. Now, the caveat here, guys, I do need to make sure I mention is that due to privacy laws in various states, you may or may not have access to those records. I say that, but I just need you to understand that if possible, you can ask. It never hurts to ask. But depending on the state where you're researching, depending on maybe the time period, you may or may not be granted access to that. This particular example that I'm going to be using is actually Massachusetts, and I was able to have someone get this record for me. So my subject of interest for this particular project I had been working on was Owen Stewart. And this is his admission and discharge record here for at Deer Island House of Correction. And so what we know here is that on March 14th, 1940, he was admitted to serve 6 months. He was 169 pounds. He was 5'5" tall, and he was 35 years of age. So at the bare minimum here, we know what his general stature was. We know his age, so we can definitely get a birth year from that if we don't already know it. We know that he was 170 pounds when he was discharged, so he didn't lose any weight while he was there. Now, this is an interesting piece here. And if you can tell from this column, it's asking for birthplace. And so it gives us an address there in Boston. So my research gut tells me most people don't put a specific address for a place of birth, but they did here. So maybe that's the home he was born in, or maybe this is where he was living before he came. I would just make a note on my research plan to tease that out a little bit more and take a closer look at it. But at the very minimum, I know that that's going to be an important address that I would need to follow up on. Now, this is, again, that 2-page ledger. If we come across here, this is his line right here. We know what he entered. We know what kind of clothes he was wearing when he entered into jail. We know that he had this brown overcoat and a brown coat and no vest, but a brown pants. He apparently was monochromatic in his dressing. He had no overalls, no jumper, but he had a gray soft cap with black shoes and black socks. So this is kind of interesting. How often do we run across the actual clothes, the description of the clothes that our ancestors were wearing, especially if we don't have a photograph of them, right? So this gives us a little bit of information here. So we know that he was a black sheep of the family. He was, being incarcerated for something. We would want to find out a little bit more about that, but we start to get an idea of what his character was and who he was based on the fact that we have a jail record for him.
Now, the reason that these 5 types of records work when it comes to finding those hard to find ancestors is because they take into account that your ancestor didn't live in a bubble. They put them in a community context, so to speak. Your ancestors were part of social networks, religious networks, employment types of networks, and had community obligations. And because of that, they had the potential to create and appear in other types of records outside of those usual birth, marriage, death records or census records. So I'm challenging you to move beyond the traditional genealogy records that you've been using and see what you can find. What types of uncommon, what kinds of out-of-the-box records could you potentially find your ancestors in for the area where they lived? Now, if you'd like to learn more about breaking through some of those genealogy research barriers that you have been coming up against, be sure and watch the video on your screen now. And also be sure and hit that subscribe button before you go. That way you'll know when I post brand new videos right here on the Are You My Cousin YouTube channel.